Hi, I'm Teri Petz from Poetic Encouragement, and I'm sitting in my friend Jessie's studio. Jessie and I have been in the trenches for a few years together, and he is amazing at technology. And when I wanted to start these podcasts, I figured who would be a better person to start this with than Jessie? He takes care of all the technical stuff, and I can just sit here relaxed and having a great time with my little bud, my friend, my work son, Jessie.
Well, thank you, Teri. As Teri said, I am Jessie Fraser. I own Social Edge Academy, and I am the co-owner, happily, of Social Edge Platinum Podcast Studio, where we're sitting today, and we're happy to host you for your first podcast episode, Teri. Doing this a little bit differently than the rest of the podcast will be for you. We're actually going to have you in the chair of the interviewee. All right. So what is Poetic Encouragement, and why did you create this podcast?
I admire people who are good at speaking without papers. I'm not one of them, unfortunately, so please forgive me for having to look at my papers. I want to make sure I don't miss things that are important. So Poetic Encouragement is a podcast series about artists, the poets, the writers, the visual artists, the musicians. Let's talk about the work with you, the challenges we face, and the joys and triumphs of the artistic journey.
What can artists expect to gain from listening to this podcast or watching it?
Artists and listeners can hear people's stories, have a glimpse into their lives, hear their challenges, their artistic processes, and how art inspires us and how it lifts us up.
How do you define poetic encouragement, and how does it relate to your work as an artist?
I work with many different media and wrote a lot of poetry over the years, participated in writing groups, and have been hosting open mics. Many people told me, since I have been hosting poetry open mics in Lethbridge since 2018, that I have given them a voice. The way they said it, it sounded that it was big to them and meaningful. In the 6 years I've been hosting, I have seen people connect on a deep level, and we have an amazing, vibrant, diverse community. I would like to extend that from Lethbridge to the bigger community and do a similar but different forum for artists all over the world.
It's beautiful. Who is the audience for this podcast, and why should they be tuning in?
The audience, as I see it right now, before even having started it, is for artists, closet artists, and people who are interested in the lives and stories of artists and how creativity and art influences them as a human, and for artists who want to put their work out there in the world.
Teri, can you share a little bit of your own artistic background?
Oh, Jessie, how many hours do we have?
Well, let's try to keep it limited.
Yes. Well, art for me started, or my involvement with art started when I was probably around 3 years old. I grew up in Hungary, and art, stories, poetry, performance was a big part of us as children. But in the last 10 years or so, I focused more on poetry than anything else because I have been participating in poetry groups, and that, of course, inspires more writing, more poetry. And also I've been hosting open mics, and that opened up a big interest around poetry for me mostly.
And did you do anything like open mics when you were still at home, or did you move to Canada when you were older?
I moved to Canada when I was 25 years old, and I'm not telling you how old I am. You know, but I'm not telling everybody else. I haven't hosted open mics, but I have been writing poetry since I was very young. I also recited poetry since I was very young. So poetry is a big part of my life, and I consider poetry the language of the heart.
Oh, it's beautiful. It really is. I've heard some of your poetry, and it is. It's beautiful.
Thank you, Jess.
What are some of the biggest challenges that artists, including yourself, face, and how do you address those in your episodes, in upcoming episodes?
Well, the way I see it is One of them is insulation, lack of community for so many artists because they are sensitive people, and being a starving artist, huge thing. And a huge choice. Does an artist go and do the 9 to 5 job and not have time for their art, or do they immerse themselves in the art and may not make money for years?
Fair.
And also the lack of emotional support. And what I noticed in our open mic series and my smaller poetry group is that when there's support, it's deep when we connect on the things we do together. And also it's uplifting. We hold each other's hands. We witness each other's journey on a deep and meaningful way, and that is amazing. And I'd like to continue with that on the online platforms as well, not just on the physical realm here.
Absolutely. What kind of guests can we expect to hear on Poetic Encouragement?
Well, Lethbridge has a very vibrant, amazing community of artists, and I am starting with people I know personally here in Lethbridge, but I will expand to the larger community worldwide. During COVID, we did Zoom open mics, and we met people from all over the world.
That's fantastic.
That was amazing, and I'd like to continue with that now that I have time to do those kind of connections.
Absolutely. That's wonderful. What is your ultimate hope for the listeners, watchers of Poetic Encouragement?
My ultimate hope is to inspire people, to build a community of people involved in the arts, and to give an opportunity to introduce their art to people interested in listening to them. We all have a story, we all have a dream, and we all need people to believe in us. I hope to see the all-inclusive support that I have seen and fostered at our open mics in Lethbridge. I'd like to see that on our podcasts, on our videos, and I'd like to have forums where people connect and talk to each other and support each other on the way.
Okay. So when you mention forums, I know that you have other forums that you use. Did you want to maybe mention any of those?
I think it's better if I just put it in the links. There's so many to talk about.
That's fair.
But my biggest one that I'm building this on and in relation to is my Substack. Called Poetic Encouragement, what I've started about almost a year ago on December 15th last year, in 2023. And it has grown a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit. And I think because of the multimedia facets of Substack, it really allows me to do videos, images, written work, sound, whatever I want to put on there, I can put it on there.
Perfect. That's good to know. Okay, so coming down, do you have a favorite moment or story from your own creative journey that you'd like to share on the podcast?
That's a tough question, Jessie, because I have so many stories throughout my life. But I think I'll start with one of my earliest ones. When I was probably in my early teens, there used to be trucks driving by our house on the highway below us, and the trucks sometimes delivered pieces of rags from a fabric company, and I think they were the odds and pieces that they cut off of the fabric, and when they created clothes. So these bits and pieces would blow off the trucks and be scattered all over the road. And me, a little curious girl, would go along and pick them up and look at them and take them home and make Muppets out of the fabric.
Oh, is that ever cool?
And then I found a big box somewhere in the bush that somebody threw away, and I made a Muppet show out of it. That was my stage. So I would open the cardboard box, I cut it in half, I would open it, and there was a curtain behind it, and then I'd bring up my little Muppets and start telling stories.
Oh, wow.
Well, my stories went to my little friends who were my neighbors, and my surrogate parents who were my other neighbors, and my biggest support. They always wanted to have my art. They wanted me to dance for them. They wanted me to read poetry to them. They wanted me to sing. And I think that's where the whole creative, my personal creative stuff started, other than the plays I was in kindergarten.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's a great way to inspire art as a whole.
Yes.
For sure. How can your listeners get involved or connect with the community of Poetic Encouragement?
You can follow us on the links provided to this with this podcast and video. And Substack has many levels of support. You can subscribe to us or to me for free. If you like the work I have, please consider being a paid customer or a paid subscriber, I believe they call it. Mm-hmm. But don't let that discourage you. I don't want you to pay unless you feel like you're able to. I want everybody to be able to access my work, my words of encouragement, and the podcasts and the videos I post there. Oh. So everybody's welcome. And of course, if you have money you want to throw at me, I'll catch it.
Okay. What role does poetry or any other art form play in encouraging creativity and fostering a positive mindset for you?
In my life, art and poetry has been a huge part of my mental well-being. It gave me a way and an avenue and an opportunity not only to express myself, but also to focus on the good things in life. Because as one of my friends who wrote a book, his name was Camille Abt, Camille wrote in his book, and it sticks with me forever. He said, there is manure in life on one side, and then there's flowers on the other side. It depends on you where you look. We all have challenges to deal with. We all have mountains to climb. And once we climb those mountains, I think it's great to celebrate our successes. But it's also very important to acknowledge and to write about or express our feelings when we're not feeling well. Poetry to me, and story writing and other forms of art for so many other people, is a great way to look at what's bothering us, look at what we need to work with, overcome them, and then look at something we can be grateful for. Because I think it's equally important to not only deal with what we're facing and analyze it and look at it and express it, but also to be grateful for the good things in our lives.
Absolutely. That's
and
wonderful.
Art in all forms can help us achieve all of those.
As a singer and songwriter, I believe that as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then my last one here for you, so this is the last question of the evening. How do you stay motivated or inspired in your own artistic practice? And how will you help others find that same drive?
Oh, I have to read that myself before I answer it. How do I stay motivated or inspired in my own practice? Well, my friends all know that the muse is a regular visitor. And I call the muse that inspirational voice that starts writing inside my head. And I even wrote a poem about it, and it's a funny one. Because I feel like if I don't pay attention to the muse for a while, she only lets me ignore her for so long, and then she's just slamming me in the face and says, okay, you better write, because otherwise I'm going to throw a tantrum. So then I have to sit down and listen to the muse and write what I have to write. And at that point, quite often, a poem is written in less than 5 minutes. Oh, wow. It just pours right out of me. So that's quite often my process, okay. Other than the times when I have to write because I have to post, or I have to write a poem to somebody who has been struggling, and that happens quite often too, that I will write a poem or a story that involves their struggles, and I put my own twist on it and my own understanding on it and send it to them as a method of supporting them in their journey.
Yeah, absolutely. That's wonderful.
Did I answer all of this? Because this was
It was more of the other portion was just how would you help other people find that same drive? And honestly, by supporting them, I think that's a huge way to help them find their own drive as well. But
absolutely. And I'm a true believer of the notion that if you start paying attention to something, it grows. If you start creating music, you'll most likely create more music, especially if you're involved with other musicians and you jam or you sing and you create together. That usually puts you on the right track of creating more of the same art that you like to create. So my biggest advice to anybody would be keep doing what you like doing. Do it as much as you can. Do it to express yourself and also to help others along the way. Because when you start helping others along the way and you start to collaborate with people, some great things happen.
absolutely, absolutely. So that's it for the questions today. I just wanted to say thank you for considering us for your podcast studio space. I look forward to doing more of these with you, Teri. Is there anything else that you'd like to say to your guests before we call a wraps on this episode?
I was going to look at a poem that I could read to people, but I didn't want to impose on Jess's time. So I think I'll add a poem to the end of this podcast at home. And I just want to thank you, Jessie, for doing this for me. I really, really appreciate it. And I couldn't have thought of anybody better to work with than you, because I love you to pieces. And I know you worked through all those technical challenges. And I really, really appreciate being here with you.
Absolutely, Teri. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Poetic Encouragement Podcast Series. Like us, love us, follow us on Substack, Facebook, YouTube, or any platform you can find us on. Thank you again. I appreciate you.